Chapter 1. Kaya couldn't quit fidgeting in her chair as she waited for their flight to be called. I can't believe we actually get to do this. Finally. May grinned at her friend. We've been online friends for what? 2 or 3 years? I can't believe the three of us have never gotten together before. Well, you and I have had our lunches, but we've never met Liz. I can't believe we're finally going to get to meet Liz. In my head, I always call her Lizard. Do you think she'd mind? May rolled her eyes. You call her that online half the time. That's true. It might feel different in person though. I'm glad she's going to pick us up at the airport. I don't know if I could drive in the mountains. May shook her head, grinning at the younger girl. Kaya was only 23, but she'd been writing since college. May was a full 10 years older and wiser. They'd become friends through a chat room on the internet where they both went to write. May had been a mentor for Kaya and had done a lot to help her launch her career. We'll be fine. Liz used to live there. I'm sure she'll be fine driving. I can't believe she's willing to leave Jack while they're still newlyweds. It's craziness. May shrugged. She chose this time because Jack's off on assignment. We have 2 weeks. Liz said she got us the best cabin on all of the ranch. Kaya frowned. I guess I don't quite understand about this ranch. I know it's some kind of a dude ranch, but it seems like so much more when Liz talks about it. I looked it up online, May said, shaking her head. It looks absolutely amazing. They do summer and winter sports. Lots of horseback riding. 4-wheelers. So many different things. I think we need to start doing this yearly. Kaya nodded eagerly. Anything that would make it so she could spend time with 2 of her closest friends every year. Her real-life best friend had gone and gotten married on her, so she'd have to hope that wouldn't happen anytime soon with May. Liz was married, but still seemed flexible. So many women acted like they were chained to their spouses when it came to travel. Kaya knew she'd never be that way. Kaya looked down at her boarding pass. May had made it very clear that she only flew first class, and since Kaya hadn't wanted to sit alone in coach, she'd been willing to pay the extra for a first-class ticket. She wondered if it really was going to be as much better than coach as she'd heard. It had been a stretch for her to pay for a flight at all, but she'd worked hard and had finally started seeing some real success with her romances, so she refused to feel guilty for it. She'd only flown a couple of times in her life, and always within Texas, so she wanted this trip to be extra special. Finally, their flight was called and the 2 friends walked toward the front. Kaya was taller than May, and slimmer. But May was absolutely perfect in Kaya's eyes. She was one of the most giving people Kaya knew, and she hoped someday her friend would learn to get out a little more. She deserved the kind of love she wrote about in her novels. Do you want the window or the aisle? May asked as they stood in line with the other first-class passengers. We don't have to sit in the seats we're assigned? Since we're right next to each other, it won't matter a lick either way. I'd rather have the window then. There's just something special about flying. I love to soar through the clouds and watch as we take off and land. May smiled, shaking her head. You enjoy all that. I need to edit on the flight. Kaya shrugged. She loved May dearly, but she was afraid her friend was working herself into an early death. She had no real-life friends as far as Kaya knew. She was alone more often than not. She knew she rarely left her house, unless she needed groceries or was having lunch with her aunt, who had raised her, and lived in a nearby town. Kaya and May lived about an hour and a half apart, and every few months, Kaya would beg May to meet her in the middle for lunch. Once they were seated, Kaya put on her seatbelt and wiggled around happily. I have leg room. Me. The girl with the legs up to her neck. May laughed. You sound like something from a bad country song if you have legs up to your neck. You're just jealous because you're shorter than me and men don't have to stand on tiptoe to kiss you. May grinned. Not terribly jealous. I'm not going to lie to you. Kaya laughed. At over 6 feet tall, she was used to being taller than most of the men she met. She just went with it. She knew that someday, somehow, somewhere she'd meet the perfect man for her, and he wouldn't care an ounce of spit how tall she was. He'd only care about what was on the inside. And his name would be Matt. May nudged her with her elbow. You're getting all goofy again. Kaya blushed, sticking her tongue out at May. Just thinking of the day when I meet my Matt. It's going to happen, you know. And you'll meet yours. She knew her friend would understand her need for a man named Matt. She put a Matt in every single one of her books as a hug to her fans. May rolled her eyes. Unless I run into Bob Bodefeld somewhere, and he decides he's magically in love with me, I don't see that happening. He's the perfect man in my eyes, and I'm honestly not sure any other man would ever measure up. Kaya sighed. We're going to be watching Lazy Love on Tuesday night, aren't we? She didn't mind the show, but she wasn't crazy over it the way May was. May shrugged. Nah. I've seen the whole series, and I have this season DVR'd. If this was a new episode, you can bet your sweet big toe, but since it's not, I don't think I'll care much. She sighed, propping her headrest differently to get more comfortable. What do you think the chances are that we can convince Liz to live our hours for this trip? Nil. I brought some sleep aid so I can go to sleep by midnight or 2 like a normal person. Hopefully it'll work. Kaya and May worked together through the night almost every night. Neither was used to going to bed until well after sunrise. May sighed. I do the same every time I travel. At least Liz understands our hours, whether she keeps them or not. I'm glad we have a few hours to write with her every night. We have each other the rest of the time. Do you really need more than me, May? Kaya batted her eyelashes at her friend, who rolled her eyes. You need serious help, Kaya. Several hours later, they'd switched planes and finally arrived at the small airport in Lewiston. Kaya had watched the clouds through the whole flight, doing her best to stay quiet while May worked. As they got off the plane, Kaya let May lead because she knew the other woman traveled a great deal more than she did. How do you know where to go? She asked as they went through the door that meant they were on the other side of security. May grinned. I follow the crowd. Kaya laughed. It's a good thing I'm a woman traveling with you and not a man. A man would have real issues with that method. You have a point. May's smile faded, and Kaya immediately knew why. For some reason, her friend was convinced she was fundamentally unlovable. Whether it was true or not, May believed it with everything inside her. They were almost to baggage claim when Kaya heard her name shouted. She grabbed May's arm, and they turned to see Liz rushing toward them. Kaya spread her arms wide, embracing her friend. She thought about shouting, "Booby bump," as Dr. Lachille had taught her on the cruise ship, but since she was meeting Liz for the first time, she decided not to freak her out. Liz hugged May as well, grinning at them. Kaya wiped away a tear, not hiding it. She was an emotional mess, and she wasn't even ashamed of it. Crying was good for the soul. I can't believe we're all here together for the first time. This is unbelievable. Kaya reached into her purse and pulled out her iPhone. We need a selfie. We need to commemorate this moment and every moment of the whole retreat. May shook her head but smiled dutifully. They posed with Kaya in the middle, and she immediately tilted her head to one side to try to look shorter. In every picture with female friends, she thought she looked like some sort of Amazon and the others looked like Lilliputians. Liz nodded to Kaya's phone. You'll share all those with us, right? I don't need to pull out my phone? Kaya shook her head. Nope. I'll even take them to my mom so she can scrapbook them all. She'll love me for it. They grabbed their luggage and followed Liz out to the car. You ride in the front. You know how freaked out I get in cars. Kaya had been in a wreck a couple of years before, and though she could drive, she preferred not to, and it was so much easier to observe the others from the back seat. While Liz drove them out of Lewiston and onto a country highway, Kaya let her mind travel freely. She watched the green grass whiz by, staring in awe at the mountains. She'd only been out of Texas a couple of times in her life, most recently for her friend Jenny's wedding on a cruise ship. Kaya heard the others talking, but paid little attention, too lost in her own thoughts. They'd have 2 weeks to talk and enjoy themselves. For now, she wanted to see this beautiful land Liz had told them about so many times. She noticed as the car slowed. This is Riston. The sheriff here is married to my friend and former boss, Kelsey, Liz explained. Nice to have law enforcement connections, Kaya said with a grin. Liz laughed. Nicer to have Weston connections. The Westons are an amazing family. They own the ranch. Get ready to be shocked. We're staying on the ranch, right? Kaya asked. Liz sighed. You weren't paying attention to me at all, were you? Kaya blinked a couple of times. Nope. Didn't hear a word. I was just telling May that we're renting the biggest cabin on the property. It has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. It's right on the lake. This one rents out months in advance, but there was a last-minute cancellation, and I was on a wait list. Danny called me when it came available, because she knew we wanted it. I can't wait to see it. I got in last night, and I chose my room. They're all about the same size, but I took the one with the private bath. You two can share, or one of you can use mine. Kaya shrugged. Yeah, no biggie either way. I'm just excited to be here. Are you hungry? Liz asked. I figured we'd go grocery shopping this evening, or tomorrow if you're too tired, but you guys may want to settle in first. We can stop at the cafe, and I can show you where I used to work. Kaya thought about it. There had been snacks on both flights, but no real meals. Yeah, I think I'm hungry. May? I am. Let's eat, May responded, looking around as they went through a huge gate and parked in front of a small cafe. We're already on the ranch, right? Kaya asked. She could see a cafe and a lot of open space. There were buildings back behind the parking lot as well. I'm going to want to get out and explore. Maybe walk around the ranch some. Liz nodded. You have to while you're here. This place is so amazing. You can explore on foot, horseback, or even four-wheeler. Either way, you're going to love it. Kaya grinned happily. I can't wait. If I get stuck while I'm riding, walking through the woods, being near a mountain, being on water, those are the things that fix me. 2 weeks of being in my perfect writing environment. I'm going to write 6 books. You'll do well to finish the one you're working on. May said with a laugh. I know you. You're going to want to spend time outside. You're going to want to chat with us while we're together. There's no way you're going to get a ton done. Kaya made a face at May as the 3 of them walked toward the cafe. What's good here? Everything. There's a new cook, and he's amazing. Whatever he has on special is worth eating. Liz waved at a blonde who obviously worked there, leading Kaya and May to a booth off to one side of the room. Once the 3 of them were seated, with May on one side and Kaya and Liz on the other, the blonde joined them. Hi, you must be Liz's writerly friends. She told me about you guys. Who is who? I'm Kaya, and that's May. Kaya knew May would prefer not to have to talk to strangers if she could avoid it. I'm Kelsey. If Liz told you horror stories about me, they were lies. If she said nice things, they're all true of course. Liz grinned at her friend. I'll never tell. Kelsey laughed, the sound filling the cafe. Bob's special today is an open-faced roast beef sandwich with mashed potatoes on the side. And a piece of his garlic bread. You wouldn't think garlic bread would go with that, but it does. Oh my, I love it. So does little Shania. Liz grimaced. Shania? Kelsey shrugged. I figured we'd name it Sean if it's a boy and Shania if it's a girl. She turned to her side and happily stroked her stomach. Do I look pregnant yet? It's like you swallowed a watermelon or something. Kaya lied. She could barely tell the girl was showing, but it was obviously not what she needed to hear. You think? Kelsey's face lit up at the thought. I never even knew I wanted to be a mother, and now it's all I can think about. I'm having a baby. She smiled happily. I'll be back in 5 to take your orders. Kaya watched Kelsey all but skip away. I've never seen anyone so happy to be told she looked big. Kelsey is just happy. She doesn't rely on people around her to be upbeat, but there's something within that just makes it happen. She kind of reminds me of you sometimes, Liz said. Me? Kaya was surprised. I'll take that as a compliment, but I'm not sure it's one I deserve. You find the good side of everything, Liz said with a grin, squeezing Kaya's hand. I feel privileged to have you two as friends. There was a squeal and a waitress, dressed all in pink, ran across the cafe and threw herself at Liz. I heard you were here for a couple of days. I'm so glad to see you. Me too. Liz turned to the others. These are my friends May and Kaya. And this is Joni, my best friend and former roommate. Kaya grinned. So good to meet you, Joni. We're her imaginary friends who live inside her computer. Joni smiled. I've heard a lot about you imaginary friends. I hope you love the ranch as much as we do. She hugged Liz once more. We'd better find some time to sit down and talk while you're here. We'll meet for breakfast one morning, Liz said. Those two are night owls. Works for me. I have to get to work. Kelsey's giving me the stink eye. With that, Joni rushed off, walking to her boss and talking to her softly as she tied on an apron over her pink polyester uniform. Kaya's eyes were drawn to the door as the bell over it rang. A tall man dressed in jeans and a plaid button-up shirt walked in, going straight to one of the stools at the counter. He had dark hair and eyes, and Kaya wanted to run her hands over his broad shoulders. Who's the dreamy cowboy? Please tell me his name is Matt. Her voice was soft and a little breathless. Dreamy cowboy? Liz looked around. Oh, that's just Glen. He works in the stable with Wyatt. Wow, I'm a writer and I have no words. I need to meet him. I want to marry him and have his babies. Liz blinked at her friend a few times. I think you've been reading and writing too many romance novels, Kaya. He's a cowboy. Get close to him, and he's going to smell like sweat and horse manure. Right at the moment, I don't even care. Please introduce me. Liz watched, and as soon as Kelsey stopped talking to Glen, she called his name. Hey, Glen. Glen turned on his chair and smiled, raising a finger in greeting. He was a man of few words, like his boss, but not quite as bad. He talked to people he liked, unlike Wyatt Weston. Hi, Liz. Come meet my friends. When Glen got to the table, he touched the brim of his cowboy hat, nodding at Kaya and May in turn. These are my friends Kaya and May. They're both writers as well. Glen smiled. He wasn't into books unless they were nonfiction. He was working on his doctoral thesis while working for the River's End Ranch as an assistant to the resident horse whisperer, Wyatt Weston. When he was finished, he hoped to open an equine therapy center to help kids with autism. He was only a few months from getting his PhD. It's nice to meet you both. What do you write? We both write romance, Kaya said. May's huge, but I'm just small potatoes. May shook her head. I'm not huge. I promise, unless you read romantic comedy, you've never heard of me. I have a feeling I've never heard of you then. Glen smiled then, a huge smile that transformed his whole face, and Kaya felt something hit her like a punch in the gut. You should pose for romance covers, Kaya blurted out without meaning to. She couldn't believe how attracted she was to the man in front of her. Glen laughed softly. I don't think so. Have you seen Friends? When Kaya nodded, he continued. Do you remember the episode where Chandler and Monica were taking engagement pictures? Kaya nodded again. Yeah. That one was hilarious. Chandler kept making this really scary face every time a camera was on him, but he would smile at her normally when the camera wasn't pointed at him. That's me. Point a camera at me, and I turn into Chandler Bing. Kaya laughed. So maybe being a romance model isn't a good idea for you. Probably not. Glen looked at the girl sitting beside Liz. She looked so animated and full of life. In a way she reminded him of Kelsey, but he felt brotherly toward Kelsey. The feelings that were rumbling around in his stomach when he looked at Kaya were definitely not something a brother would feel toward a sister. So what do you do here? Kaya asked, needing to know how to find him. Sure, she could ask Liz, but it was better to ask him. I work in the stables with Wyatt. I teach people to ride, groom, exercise, and feed the horses. Basically, if it has to do with horses, I do it. I've even been known to help them give birth if the doc can't make it out right away. Well, maybe I'll make it out to the stable one day this week. I'd like to learn to ride. Do I need to make an appointment for that? Glen tilted his head to one side. Yeah, it's best if you do. Especially if you want a specific person to teach you. Well, then I'll make an appointment. I have a feeling I'd feel more comfortable with you teaching me. You're the only one I've met. He nodded, smiling a little, turning when he heard Kelsey call his name. My lunch is ready. He touched the brim of his hat once more. It was nice meeting you ladies. Kaya watched him walk away, her eyes on his bottom. I'd always heard that cowboys had the best butts, but I didn't believe it until today, she whispered to the other two. May covered her mouth with one hand to keep from laughing. Liz just shook her head. I knew spending 2 weeks with you was going to be interesting, but until this very moment, I had no idea how interesting. You love me, and you know it. Kaya sighed happily. I get to spend 2 weeks with my favorite 2 imaginary people and fall in love all at once. This is going to be the best 2 weeks of my whole entire life. Chapter 2. Glen walked back to the stable, his mind on the girl in the cafe. He thought she'd said her name was Kaya, but he wasn't sure. She'd been almost a blur to him, so excited and animated. He chuckled a bit, embarrassed that she'd said he should model for book covers. He was a psychologist, gearing up to open his own ranch for equine therapy. He specialized in the study of autistic children, and he could think of no greater reward in life than working with those special kids and horses at the same time. He shook his head. No, I can't think about a girl. Maybe in a few years. For now, I need to keep my eyes on the prize. I'll finish my doctorate, and then turn the ranch my uncle left me into a paradise for small kids. He'd been saving every dollar he made for years to accomplish his goal, and he had made some small changes to the ranch. The stable was ready for horses, and he had fixed up the gazebo. Maybe in 5 years he'd be ready to think about a woman, but for now, he needed to concentrate on his goals. And Pretty Little Romance writers did not count as goals. Asterisk. Liz drove Kaya and May to the Barefoot bungalow where they'd be staying. This is my favorite cabin, because the living area looks out over the water. You're going to be amazed at this place. While they waited for Liz to unlock the door, Kaya laughed at a sign on the front of the cabin. I thought you were saying barefoot bungalow. But it's barefoot. Liz nodded. Yeah. I'm not sure who named this one, but they have a sense of humor. She got the door opened and stepped inside. Kaya followed Liz, looking around. Wow. This place is incredible. She took the steps that led to the back of the porch, and she saw the beautiful lake through the huge floor-to-ceiling windows. Can I live here forever? Liz grinned. We got a huge discount on this place, because of my connection with the Westons and it being a last-minute vacancy. I promise you, not even May could afford to live here. I don't know that I could leave Wiggyville and my aunt, but I'm happy to stay here for a couple of weeks. May stared around her, obviously pleased with the house they'd share. Do you want to pick your room first? Kaya asked May. I can deal with anything. May shook her head. No, that's fine. You pick. No big deal. Kaya wandered into both of the rooms, but to her there was no contest. They were both about the same size and furnished similarly, but one had a door that led to a balcony overlooking the lake. She wanted to be a selfless person and give that room to May, but she just couldn't make herself do that. She could picture herself out there late at night, listening to the sounds of the lake while she wrote her heart out. She'd invite May to write there with her. That would be just as good, right? Can I have this one? Kaya asked May. Not feeling sure if she should just announce it was hers, or offer it to the older woman who had helped her so much. Absolutely. Where I sleep isn't all that important to me. May put her things in the third bedroom and wandered out. I think we should get the grocery shopping done tonight. We're going to need writing snacks. Liz nodded. We won't be able to write without them, and then you never know what could happen. Universal implosion. Kaya said in an odd voice. It would be like starting a sprint at a time that didn't end in 5 or 0. Kaya, I'm going to tell you a secret, and I don't want you to freak out. Maybe you should sit down first. May suggested. Kaya sat on the edge of the couch, looking at her friend. What's the secret? When you're not around, we start sprints at times ending in 3 and 7, just because we can. Kaya's eyes grew wide, and she put her hand on her chest. I'm aghast at this information. Do you hear me? Just aghast. How could you? Liz hurried over to pat Kaya awkwardly on the shoulder. It doesn't mean we love you any less. But universal implosion. The universe seems fine. May told her earnestly. Maybe it's only when you start at an odd time that the universe implodes. Kaya put her head in her hands for a moment, knowing she was being overly dramatic and enjoying every minute of it. How could you? Liz patted some more. There. I'll cook dinner tonight to make it up to you. Kaya looked up with a smile. It's a deal. Were you just acting upset, so I'd offer? Of course not. How could I know you'd offer to feed me? Liz frowned. I guess you couldn't. Do you want to unpack first or go to the store first? Kaya looked at May. No preference here. You? May shrugged. Let's just get it over with. I hate grocery shopping. That's because you've never shopped with me. Kaya announced excitedly. Liz groaned. Remember, I know these people. Don't you dare embarrass me, Kaya. I'll do my best. Kaya jumped up from the chair. Let me just get my purse, and I'm ready. She'd thrown it over her suitcase, which was already in her new room. As she hurried away, she heard May say softly, I hope she behaves herself. Me too. I heard that. Kaya yelled out as she walked back into the room with her purse over one shoulder. Let's go conquer the grocery store. How about I make a list of the things I want and send you with my debit card? May asked, looking back and forth between Liz and Kaya. Kaya laughed, sliding her arm through May's. You're going to love me even more after this shopping trip. I guarantee it. When they got to the store, each of them grabbed their own grocery cart, and they walked up and down the aisles together. They found all of their favorite writing snacks, foods they talked about all the time in their online chat room. Don't forget we need to buy meal stuff, May said, obviously surprised at the sheer amount of junk food that had jumped into their carts. Does this mean you're offering to cook? Kaya asked. May made a face. I can if I have to. Kaya stopped in the middle of the produce section. I'll plan to cook 4 meals. I'll buy the stuff for that. You guys each plan 4 meals. We'll eat out once a day, have snack stuff, and we can get cereal for breakfast. No one is cooking more than their fair share. I can go along with that as long as there's a crockpot and liners. I refuse to clean crockpots, but I refuse to cook without them. There's a crockpot, but we'll need to buy liners, Liz said with a shrug. When they were finally ready to leave, each of them had a cart full and paid for her own groceries. Kaya was first in the checkout line. As the cashier rang them up, Kaya chatted with her. This is my first time in Idaho. I'm super excited. You staying at River's End Ranch? The brunette, whose name tag read Donna, asked. Yes. It's fabulous. I've never seen anything like it. Donna smiled. My brother works there. I've been out there a few times. My dad used to golf there, and I've done some whitewater rafting. I want to try rock climbing, and I've been reading up on it. She scanned a box of grasshopper cookies. What brings you here? We're here for a writer's retreat. We're all online friends, but this is our first time to all be together in person. Oh, that's cool. What do you write? Romance. Liz writes mysteries, and May writes romance as well. Donna looked back in the line and saw Liz, raising a hand with a smile. I know Liz. Hey you. Where'd you lose Jack? Liz smiled back. He's on assignment for a couple of weeks, so I came here with my friends. I've been wanting to show them the ranch forever. Sounds like fun. Donna finished scanning the groceries and gave Kaya her total. After swiping her debit card, Kaya stepped to the side. It was nice meeting you. You too. Liz checked out next, and when she was done, she stood close to Kaya. Donna is Glen's kid sister, she whispered softly. Wait, you're Glen's sister? He's my dream man. Kaya knew she shouldn't blurt something like that out, but she couldn't remember a time in her life when knowing she shouldn't say something had kept her quiet. Donna laughed. That's because you've never shared a bathroom with him. Kaya grinned. What's his favorite thing to do? I'm going to lure him out of the stables while I'm here if it kills me. He's been so focused on his school and starting his ranch that I don't even know what he likes anymore. He was into sports in school, but doesn't seem to have time for anything like that anymore. That's sad. Kaya hated the idea of Glen not doing the things he enjoyed. He's in school? Oh, yeah. He's about to finish up his doctorate in psychology. Psychology? Kaya was surprised. A cowboy getting a doctorate in psychology just didn't seem normal to her. Yeah. Ask him about it. I promise it's the one thing the man cannot shut up about. Kaya grinned. She loved that she had something to talk to him about. Maybe she could head to the stable with some sandwiches, and they could have a picnic. She wondered how that would go over with his boss. I will. On their way back to the ranch, Liz asked, Kaya, you're not really thinking of trying to start a relationship with Glen, are you? Why not? Liz sighed. Don't get me wrong, Glen's a good guy. There's not a thing wrong with him, but he's driven. He's so focused on what he wants from life, he's never let a girl in. I've seen a lot of women hit on him while they were here vacationing, and not one of them got anywhere. Kaya shrugged. As soon as I saw him, I knew he was my destiny. It'll work for me. May shook her head, turning around to look at her. You're going to get your heart broken, aren't you? Probably. Are you going to be there to mop up the pieces? I guess so. Be careful. May sounded resigned. She was obviously concerned, but she knew Kaya well enough to know not to try to talk her out of it. I've written about heartache. Why not experience it? My writing will ring true that way, won't it? Kaya knew the others were aware of her history with men, or lack thereof. She'd been kissed once, after her senior prom in high school, and that was the only time. Her days and nights had been better spent at home, practicing her craft. She understood Glen better than most women would. And she was going to spend the rest of her life with him. Asterisk. Kaya groaned when her alarm went off at 11 the following morning. She'd taken medicine to sleep, like she'd planned, but she still hadn't been able to fall asleep until after sunrise. She had to get up though. Today was the day she was going to take charge of her destiny. She quickly showered, running a brush through her short-cropped blonde hair. She dressed in a pair of jeans and a comfortable t-shirt. When she got into the main area of the house, there was no one around, so she quickly scrawled a note to her friends. Going to the stable to see if I can get horseback riding lessons. Back before dinner time. Kaya. They had said they'd eat lunch at the cafe every day or whatever, but they'd have a real dinner together at the cabin. She was following the plan, mostly. She hurried to the cafe and sat at the bar. Kelsey was there, a smile on her face. Kaya was impressed with how upbeat the other girl always seemed to be. Hey, Kaya. What can I get you? Kaya studied Kelsey for a moment before leaning forward. Can you keep a secret? Kelsey nodded, her eyes twinkling. I love to keep secrets. What do you want to tell me? Well, I'm going to convince Glen that I'm his dream girl. I was hoping you knew his favorite sandwich. I want to pack a lunch and take it to the stables. Kelsey blinked a couple of times. Not bashful, are you? Where would that get me in life? Kelsey's laughter filled the cafe. I like you, Kaya. I like you too. Well? Do you know? Pimento cheese and ham. It's what he always asks for. Sounds good to me. Can you make me a romantic lunch for two? Bob's not the most romantic chef in the world. I'll have him make you a couple of Glen specials, though. Kelsey disappeared into the kitchen for a moment, and she hurried back. He's on it. I'll make the rest here. She pulled out a box that was obviously meant for a to-go lunch, adding chips and cookies. Drinks? Kaya shrugged. Do you know what he drinks? Yeah, he's a Coke guy. Then put in a Coke for him and a Sprite for me. No problem. Kelsey efficiently packed the box while Kaya watched. Any plans on how you're going to make him fall for you? Kaya shook her head. I have a topic for conversation, and it'll grow from there, I'm sure. What about you? Any ideas? I mean, you're married, so you must have done something right. Kelsey laughed. I'm married to the most wonderful man in the whole world. My knees get mushy just thinking about him. You married the sheriff, right? I think that's what Liz told me. I did. He did all the pursuing, though. Well, other than the first kiss, because I grabbed him and made that happen myself. Kelsey rushed off to the kitchen, got the sandwiches from the chef, and hurried back. She packed them into the box and put the whole thing into a bag with Kelsey's cape emblazoned on the side. Here you go. Kaya paid and hurried off toward the stable. Liz had given her and May maps of the ranch the night before, so she had an idea of where to go. She was amazed at the sheer size of the place. As soon as she stepped outside the cafe, she saw Glen walking toward her. Hi you. He grinned. Hi. Never had he met a woman he was so instantly attracted to, and he could feel that it was mutual. It was too bad he couldn't transport her 5 years into the future. He'd be ready for her then. I got us lunch from the cafe. I thought we could have a picnic. He frowned. He wanted nothing more than to sit down with her and get to know her better, but he just wasn't sure that was the best idea for him. Well, I was going to the cafe. Kaya wasn't about to take no for an answer after all the work she'd put into getting everything ready, not to mention getting up before the crack of noon. She grabbed his arm, tucking her hand through it. I have lunch. You have to eat, and I promise not to bite. Eat with me. He sighed. Yeah, okay. There were benches all along the walking paths of the ranch, and he walked to the nearest one, her hand on his arm, the whole way. He sat down on one end of the bench, and she put their meal between them, pulling out goodies. She divvied them up, well aware of his eyes on her. I met your sister at the grocery store last night. How'd you know she's my sister? The two of them looked nothing alike. He was as dark as he could be and still be Caucasian, and she had red hair and pale skin. Liz told me. She opened her bag of Cheetos, immediately worrying about the mess she'd make. She'd have Cheeto dust everywhere in a minute. Looking into the box, she pulled out a few napkins and set them on her lap, ready to apply them to remove the layer of orange that was about to cover her. She said you're about to have your doctorate in psychology. What is a cowboy going to do with a PhD in psychology? She'd figured him for more of a veterinarian-type man. Or even just an agriculture major. Glen took a big bite of his sandwich, studying her. Not many people knew about his plans. My uncle left me a ranch. It's nothing like River's End, of course, but it's a decent size. It was run down and dilapidated by the time I got it, but I see potential. I'm going to turn it into an equine therapy center. Really? Her eyes grew big as she studied him. That's so cool. He smiled, ducking his head. He hadn't expected such an enthusiastic response. My study is concentrated in autism spectrum disorders, and I want to make a difference in the world. I think this is my way to do it. Wow. And here I thought you were just a cowboy. I'm really impressed. I think that's an incredible goal. How much longer before you have your PhD? Donna had been right. Once he started talking about his plans, his face lit up, and he talked a lot about his hopes and dreams. Watching him while she ate, Kaya was thrilled she hadn't been so drawn to just a muscle-bound cowboy. No, this man, this very special man, was going to do something for others, and she couldn't be prouder. When they'd finished eating, Kaya gathered up their trash and walked to a nearby trash receptacle. Is working at the ranch helping you with your goals? It is. I have the psychology stuff down, but I need to learn more about horses to be good at what I plan to do. So, I'm here to work with Wyatt Weston. He's incredible with horses. Sometimes it seems that they can just read his mind. I want to learn to be more like him. I mean, I've ridden my whole life, and I've always had a special affinity toward them, but Wyatt, you have to see him to believe. It's like they can hear what he's thinking, and they respond. What is on your agenda for this afternoon? I'd sure like to learn to ride. He frowned, knowing he was making a mistake, but he genuinely enjoyed being with her. She was a fun, interesting person. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and I have Wednesdays and Thursdays off. I work on the weekends, so Wyatt doesn't have to if he doesn't want to. Why don't we meet tomorrow, and I'll teach you to ride? That way I don't have to charge you. Will you get in trouble for that? Glen shook his head, a lock of dark hair settling over his forehead. Not at all. They don't care what I do on my time off, and the ranch is open for me to use. I keep 2 of my horses here. It's easier for me to take care of them this way, and if the ranch has a huge party going out on a trail ride, they can use them. He stopped walking and turned to her. You're a nice girl, Kaya, so I need to tell you something. He had to give her the opportunity to back away now. She deserved to know the truth if they were to spend time together. She cocked her head to one side, curious about what had brought the gloomy look to his face. What's that? I'm not looking for a relationship. At all. It'll be years before my therapy center is built up enough to support a family. I make money too, you know. I don't do as well as May does, but I hold my own. I can certainly support myself. He shrugged. Doesn't really matter. It's not a good time for me to start a relationship. We can be friends for the time you're here, but I don't want you to hold out hope for more than that. What if that's not good enough for me? He shook his head. Then I'll have to say there's no point in us being together at all. I don't have time for distractions right now. She sighed. And I'm a distraction. She took a step closer, leaned toward him, and brushed her lips against his. I had to know what it felt like to kiss you. And? Glen was surprised he could find his voice. The woman beside him was something else. As magical as I expected. Taking a deep breath, she forced a smile on her face. I'll see you tomorrow. Around 9? Noon? He frowned. You're a night owl? She nodded. I write through the night usually. I could go as early as 11. Okay, meet me here at 11. I'll bring a lunch. Sounds good. She turned and ran before he could say anything else. She didn't care what he said though, Glen was going to fall in love with her. She could feel it. Chapter 3. As the three friends worked together that evening, eating the chicken and rice dish Kaya had prepared, Liz asked Kaya how her lunch with Glen had gone. Kaya was surprised it hadn't happened sooner, but when she'd returned to the cabin, Liz and May were out eating lunch, and Kaya had gone straight to her room to take a nap. She knew there was no way she'd be able to work after so little sleep the night before if she didn't. I don't know. I mean, it was a nice meal. And I really like him. He told me that he's not ready for a relationship, though, and I need to know that going in. Kaya took another bite of her dinner, shrugging. So I kissed him. May stared at her in shock. You kissed him? Because he told you he's not looking for a relationship? Kaya, I've always considered you to be a bright woman, but I have to ask you something. What's that? Have you lost your ever-loving mind? When a man tells you he's not interested in a relationship, you don't kiss him. You say thank you and back off. Maybe that's what you do, May. It appears I kiss him. He wasn't even trying to kiss me either. I just leaned in and locked lips with him. I'm sure I can convince him that he's making a mistake. May simply shook her head. I think you're making a huge mistake. Kaya shrugged. Maybe I am, but I believe in love. I believe if I see a man, and fall for him at first sight, then I'm meant to have a relationship with him. So, I'm going to pursue that relationship. I may go back to Texas in 2 weeks with my tail between my legs. I may end up with a broken heart. But I won't regret anything. I will know I did everything I could to live life to the fullest, because that's the right thing to do. May bit her lip, obviously struggling not to criticize her friend. I love you, Kaya. I hope you don't get hurt, but we'll be here for you if you need us. Kaya smiled in her cheery way. Sounds good. Now, to conquer a couple of chapters tonight. I think Haley needs to do something wild and crazy, if only to make Theo's head spin. Kaya was aware the others kept watching her as they wrote that night, concern written all over their faces. She forced herself not to care. If love wasn't worth taking risks for, what was? Asterisk. Kaya dressed carefully for her writing lesson with Glen the following day. She wore jeans, a pair of pink cowboy boots, and a pink and blue plaid button-up shirt. When she was dressed, she looked at herself in the mirror for a moment before hurrying out the door. She'd hit her word goal the night before, but just barely. She'd be taking another nap after less than 4 hours of sleep, but it was worth it to see Glen. Liz seemed to be adjusting to her and May's sleep schedule for the time they were there, and though Kaya knew she'd go back to her normal schedule once she was home again, she was glad they had the extra time with her. Liz was everything Kaya had hoped she'd be. Kaya all but ran toward the stables, running a little later than she'd like. The boots weren't the best footwear to run in, though, so it was more of a very fast walk than a true run. Glen was waiting for her with 2 saddled horses. "I have lunch in my saddlebags," he said in lieu of a greeting. "Oh, good. I was riding until 6, so I didn't even think about it." He stared at her for a moment. "You rode until 6 this morning? Did anyone really keep that kind of hours?" She nodded. "Yup." He was wearing a pair of old faded jeans, cowboy boots covered in mud, at least she hoped it was mud, and a button-up shirt. "Hey, we're Twinkies." "Twinkies?" he asked, confused. "Maybe it's just a Texas thing. We're dressed alike, so we're twins, but we say Twinkies?" "I'm really not sure why." He smiled, shaking his head. "I guess we are. And I hope you like Twinkies, because I packed some for dessert." She laughed, going to him and hugging him. Every time she touched him, she felt a jolt of electricity go straight through her body, so she touched him whenever she could. It was research after all. How could she continue writing convincingly about a couple who had so much passion for each other if she never felt it for herself? He took her hand to help her up onto the horse. "Put your left foot in the stirrup, and you'll swing your right leg over his back." She listened and was soon seated in the saddle, straight and tall. "Good job. This is Muffin, by the way." "Muffin? Oh, I love that name. What's your horse's name?" she asked, nodding to the mare he was mounting. "Molly." He sighed. "Don't ask. My sister wanted to name them, and I told her she could before I asked her what her ideas were." "Well, I like the names." "Of course you do." He studied her for a moment, and then decided it was time to get on with the riding lesson. To go forward, you're going to click your heels on the horse's sides. To stop, you pull on the reins. I'm going to ride in front, because I want to take you through the old west town and down by the lake. I thought we could picnic there. That would please me like nothing else I can express. There's something about being near water that just makes me so happy and fills my mind with new characters that demand to be written." She sighed happily. "I went on a cruise for my best friend's wedding a few months back, and my sister and I had a balcony room. I sat out on that balcony every single night and felt the ideas pouring over me. I can't express what a beautiful experience it was." "You have a sister? Older or younger?" "She's 5 minutes younger. I call her Bridget the midget." Glen laughed. "Is she that short?" he asked, calling over his shoulder. "Yup. She's 5'2", and I'm just under 6'1". It's hard to believe we're not only sisters, but twins." They were silent for the 5-minute ride to the mock town. He waited until she was beside him and pointed out the different buildings. "Each of the buildings has an Old West look, but we give them true purposes here. The jail is where ranch security is based. The bakery is really a bakery. The general store sells everything from groceries to ranch apparel. The blacksmith shop is the headquarters for the ranch maintenance team. The apothecary is a first aid station run by a nurse, so if there are any injuries they can be seen to immediately. The saloon is a soda shop." "That's really clever. I love the ambience of the town, but I like the fact that they're not just wasted buildings too." She noted there were rails to hitch the horses to and even troughs for the horses to drink from. "There's always something going on here." There's trivia night at the restaurant on Thursdays, and there are trail rides. Whitewater rafting. You name it, and the ranch offers it. There's even a golf course. It really seems to be an amazing place. Oh, it truly is. He was still moving slowly, talking to her as they went. Have you been to the lake yet? We're staying at the Barefoot Bungalow, which is right on the lake. My room has a little porch that overlooks it, and I sit out there sometimes, listening to the sounds. I don't know how I'm ever going to be able to go back to Texas after being here. It's absolutely amazing. He grinned. Okay, I'm going to lead again. Are you and Muffin doing all right? Any questions for me? Yes, we're doing fine. Nope, no questions. Well, maybe a couple. Like, will you kiss me again? Want to spend every waking moment with me while I'm here? He pulled ahead of her again, leading her past a small house with a yard covered in leprechaun, gnome, and fairy lawn ornaments. He sped up a little as he rode past the house, but Kaya was sure she could see at least 6 bunnies lined up on a window seat watching them pass. She made a mental note to ask Liz who lived there later. They went through a wooded area, past more RVs than Kaya cared to count, and finally they were at the lake. Glen dismounted quickly and tied the reins of his horse to a hitching post, obviously put there for just that purpose. There was a trough with a water pump over it, and he quickly pumped some water into the trough for his horse to drink. When he walked over to her, she was still in her saddle, making no move to get down. Are you going to get down and eat with me? Kaya looked at him on the ground so far below her, and smiled sweetly. I think I'm good where I am, thanks. Why don't you just hand me my lunch, and I'll eat it here? He sighed. You're afraid to get down, aren't you? Why would I be afraid? Is there a reason for me to be afraid? Panic entered her voice, and she clutched the saddle horn for dear life. No, there's not. You remember how you got up there, right? Just do the same thing coming back down. Put your weight in the stirrup on the left side, and swing your right leg over. I'll be here to catch you if you fall. She stared at him for a moment, trying to determine if he was strong enough to catch her. She was slender, but she was tall, and she'd never met a man who she trusted to handle her weight if necessary. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Kaya, you have to get down sometime. If you stay in that saddle for much longer without a break, your bum is going to get awfully sore. She gave him her best, shocked Southern belle look. Glen, did you just mention my bum? Why, that's as good as a marriage proposal in some parts of the world. He rolled his eyes, refusing to let her change the subject. Come on. I'll be right here, I promise. In the end, he didn't need to catch her, because she dismounted gracefully. I guess these horses are a lot more fun than the carousel horses at Six Flags. He shook his head, taking the horse's reins and tying her next to her companion. Let's go eat. He dug through the saddlebags and pulled out a small feast while she watched. Then he led her over to the edge of the water where there were 2 huge rocks next to each other. He took a seat on one and indicated the other for her. You were worried about the comfort of my bum not even a minute ago, and now you're going to make me sit on a rock? Glen laughed softly. It's either that or the grass, and I think you'll find the rock more comfortable. She wrinkled her nose, but climbed onto the rock, accepting the lunch he handed her. Ham and pimento cheese again. Yeah, it's all I ever eat for lunch. I made these myself though. She took a big swig of the Sprite he'd given her before responding. Thanks for providing lunch for me. You're giving me free horseback lessons, so technically I should probably be feeding you. So tell me about your sister. She's 5 minutes younger than you? Are you two really close? Kaya sighed. My relationship with my sister is complicated. When we're together, we just want to go for each other's throats. We seem to have 2 choices. act ridiculous or fight with each other. So usually we choose to act ridiculous. He frowned at that. What do you mean act ridiculous? Well, we went on a cruise, because our friend Jenny was being set up at the altar, right? Glen stared at her in disbelief. When you say set up at the altar, do you mean she married someone she'd never met? Yup. It was nuts, but she's so happy. They're expecting their first. There's someone out there who will introduce people at the altar? Kaya nodded. Yes, she's this amazing matchmaker. Her name is Dr. Lachille, and she's nuts. She met me and immediately grabbed me in a huge hug, yelling, "Booby bump." I loved her. She ended with a sigh, and Glen couldn't help but laugh. Don't tell Kelsey that. She'll be booby bumping everyone on the ranch. Kaya giggled. I can just picture that. In a few months, she'll be looking for other pregnant women to belly bump with. She's fun. Okay, wait. We got sidetracked somehow. You were telling me about how you got along with your sister on your cruise. Glen took a bite of his sandwich, as he gave her his full attention. Well, we decided to be silly and laugh together, but we kind of embarrassed Jenny a little. He tilted his head to one side inquiringly. How? Oh, little things. Like our first night on the ship, Bridget and I each ordered 2 desserts, and Jenny ordered 1. So, we shoved them all in front of her and took a picture of her with them. Glen bit his lip, stifling a laugh as he pictured it. That wasn't very nice. It was all he could do not to laugh out loud. I know. Is that all you did? He asked. He'd expected to hear of multiple things. She shrugged. Sure. What else did you do? We kind of stabbed each other with shrimp forks. Constantly. And when they took them away before dessert, we asked for more, so we could eat our dessert with teeny tiny forks. And we sang I Got You, Babe to each other during karaoke. Interesting song choice, can you sing? Oh, absolutely not. But at least I know I can't sing. Bridget thinks she can. I think I'm glad I wasn't on that cruise. He'd never taken a cruise, and he wasn't sure he wanted to after hearing her cruise stories. I wish I'd brought the scrapbook my mom made of the cruise to show you. Bridget came up with this idea to take a picture with every photographer every night on the ship. And then we took selfies with all the photographers. So, Mom scrapbooked them all for my birthday. Glen shook his head. Your mother approves of this behavior? Oh, no. If she'd been there, she'd have been hiding from us. She didn't mind hearing about it afterward, though. She just kept saying, at least you didn't fight. We fight a lot. Sounds like it. Is Bridget that terrible of a person? Kaya scrunched up her face as she thought about it for a minute. No, she's not terrible. She just gets on my very last nerve, to the point I want to throw her on the floor and tap dance on her face. It's the sibling thing. I don't want to do that to my sister. Well, you weren't in school with your sister, though, were you? We grew up in a small town. 1 class for each grade. We were in every class together. 1st through 12th grade. When we finally chose a college, we chose the same one, but we refused to be roommates. The admission counselor we saw suggested it, and you should have seen the horrified look on Mom's face. Nope. Bridget and I will never live together again. Kaya wished she could explain how she felt about her sister more satisfactorily, but Bridget had to be seen to be understood. I guess that's the difference. And Donna is 6 years younger. I'm sure that helps. And I bet you feel protective of her, right? Big brotherly? He nodded. Of course. Well, I don't feel protective of Bridget. Not at all. She took a long drag of her Sprite. Let's talk about something more interesting. Like what? Well, how long do you think you'll keep working on the ranch? He shrugged. Once I have my doctorate, I'll probably be moving on. Maybe I'll work here a couple of days a week, but not more than that. I need to get my own business up and running. True. What about you? Tell me about your work. Kaya shrugged. What's to tell? I write romance. I met May and Liz in a chat room for writers where we sprint write. It helps me be more accountable, and I get a lot more done that way. Is it hard for you to get your work done? Sometimes. It's hard to stay motivated at times. I am an indie writer, so I don't necessarily have firm deadlines. I try to work hard, but sometimes it's easy to slack off. May is amazing that way. She puts out a book every couple of weeks, rain or shine. I do at least a book every 3 weeks, though, which is lots more than most. Wow. I didn't know it was even possible to write a book in 3 weeks. Oh yeah. I've done a book in a week, but that's a lot harder for me. May can do a book in 5 days. If I didn't love her so much, I'd hate her sometimes. Glen shook his head. That sounds almost superhuman. Can I tell you a secret? Kaya asked, looking in both directions to make sure no one was listening. Sure. Glen couldn't believe how much he enjoyed just sitting and talking to Kaya. He'd always had trouble coming up with things to talk about on dates, but she was so easy to be with. Her slight Texas twang made her all the more endearing to him. I think May is superhuman. I've never seen anyone be able to do things the way she does. Her fingers just fly over the keyboard, and she never seems to need to take breaks to think or anything. Her hands touch the letters, and she's off, words seeming to flow from every pore. It's kind of eerie, really. He grinned. I'm sure she's human. Maybe. I'm just glad she uses her powers for good and not evil. He laughed at that. You know what, Kaya? What? I think you're pretty terrific. I'm glad I spent my day off with you. I probably should have done something constructive with my time, like working on my dissertation, but it's nice to be with someone special. Kaya grinned, wondering if he realized he'd just told her she was special. I'm glad I can entertain you. Does that mean I can talk you into doing something with me tomorrow too? He frowned. I really shouldn't. I need to work on my dissertation. She nodded. I understand. I had to work last night. You know what? You're only here for 2 weeks. I'll work on my dissertation at night. Yeah, let's spend tomorrow together. Do you want to rent some 4-wheelers and go for a ride to the base of the mountains? She shielded her eyes and looked across the lake to the mountain that rose majestically just beyond it. That sounds wonderful. You wouldn't rather take horses? I think your bum is going to be much too sore for horse riding tomorrow. Besides, you haven't had enough practice for me to be willing to take you into the mountains. Maybe by next week, we'll have worked up to that. I hope so. How long can you be out today, without messing up your work schedule? Kaya sighed, pulling out her phone to check the time. I should be back by 2 at the latest, so I can nap before we start work for the night. It's not my turn to cook, so that'll make things easier. She eyed him for a moment. I could ask the others if I can invite you over to write with us, since that's what you'll be doing as well. She knew May would want to wear pajamas, though, and she might not feel comfortable doing that with a man there. She wanted him there, though. They only had 2 weeks together. She wanted every moment she could get with him. He shook his head. No, I have all my research notes at home. I'd have to bring too much with me to make it work. She nodded. I understand. She was both relieved and sad. She wanted him there, but she wasn't sure the others would. When they got back to the stable, he took Muffin's reins from her. I'll see you tomorrow at 11 again? She nodded. Sounds good to me. I'll bring lunch again. Kaya walked to him and wrapped her arms around him, just resting her head on his shoulder. He was a good 4 inches taller than her, which thrilled her to no end. It was hard to find a man tall enough to make her feel small. Thanks for a wonderful time. He kissed her cheek softly, not wanting to make her think he'd changed his mind about them having a future. I'll see you tomorrow. As Kaya hurried away, she had a spring in her step and a smile on her face. He thought she was special. People had told her she was a million times, but it was hard to care what anyone else in the world thought. Glen was the only one whose opinion mattered. Chapter 4. After Kaya left Glen, she hurried over to the cafe, wanting to talk to Kelsey for a moment. She didn't know why she was so drawn to the young woman, but she truly felt as if they were kindred spirits, drawn to her almost as strongly as she was to May and Liz. Kaya sat down at the counter and waited for Kelsey to come to her. Hey there, Kaya. What can I get you? A big glass of milk and a couple of cookies. The cookies you gave me yesterday were wonderful. Do you make them here in the cafe? No, those come from the bakery. Miranda makes them fresh every morning. Today's specialty is a caramel ginger snap. They're to die for. Kaya nodded emphatically. Sounds perfect. That's what I want. Kelsey grinned. You won't regret it. I swear Miranda is a genius. Kelsey put the cookies and milk in front of Kaya and then walked around the counter to sit beside her. I think Bob and Miranda need to get together. They're both very territorial, but they really would suit. Really? Kaya couldn't help but think that living at this ranch, which seemed to be so full of love, would be a great source of never-ending ideas for a romance writer. I had lunch with Glen again today. Oh? Kaya nodded. I like him a lot. He's pretty special. I don't know him very well. He comes here to get food, but he kind of keeps to himself for the most part. He went to school with one of my brothers. Wes. I think? I don't really remember. He told me I shouldn't tell you about something I was taught by a matchmaker recently, so I decided to come over and tell you right away. Kelsey giggled. Sounds great. What is it? Well, her name is Dr. Lachille, and that's not part of the story, but it helps me tell it. Anyway, anytime she sees someone she knows and likes, she runs toward them with her arms spread, yelling, "Booby bump." Kaya grinned, shaking her head. I just think you'd be someone who would truly enjoy a good booby bump. Kelsey nodded, looking around the cafe. There are no customers other than you. Come on. Booby bump with me. She slid off the stool and spread her arms wide. Kaya flew at her, hugging the small woman close. Our first official booby bump. What will I do when my belly's too big for booby bumps, though? I can already feel my clothes getting too small. I think when your belly is too big for booby bumps, it'll be a sign that it's time to seek out other pregos and do belly bumps. Won't that be fun? Yes. I knew I liked you, Kaya. You're going to need to give me your email address and phone number so we can keep in touch when you go home. And that's not something I say to guests of the ranch very often. I will do that so happily. Kaya sat back down to finish her snack. I need to get back to Barefoot Bungalow soon. I need a nap so I can work all night. Glen is cutting into my sleep time. He's worth it, Kelsey said with a wink. Kaya laughed. I think he is. We're going to the base of the mountains on four-wheelers tomorrow. Kelsey sighed. Shane won't let me get on a four-wheeler right now. He's worried about the baby. Do you enjoy them? Well, it's more than that. I'm on a quest, you see, a quest to find Bigfoot. He lives right here in these mountains. Kelsey looked down at her hands, which were folded in her lap. I don't suppose you'll search for signs of him for me while you're out there, would you? Signs of Bigfoot? Kaya asked. She wasn't sure she believed in Bigfoot, but it sure would be fun to look. I'd love to. Do you have anything specific you want me to watch for? Kelsey's smile lit up her whole face. I'll make you a list. Asterisk. While working that night, Kaya heard her phone ring and realized she'd forgotten it in her bedroom. BRB. I need to go get my phone. You're not sneaking off to go potty without announcing it, are you? Liz asked skeptically. No. My phone is really ringing. I wouldn't risk a 30-second shunning. I always announce potty. It's a moral necessity. Kaya rushed off into the room she was using and grabbed her phone, which was charging on the nightstand. Hello? Hey, sis. Bridget the midget. What's up? How's Idaho? Are you having fun with your weird writer friends? Kaya sank down onto her bed and hugged one knee to her chest. I'm having so much fun. Liz is just as wonderful as I thought she'd be, and I already knew how incredible May was. Bridget was silent for a moment. There's a guy. You met a guy there. You have no clue what you're talking about, Bridget. Kaya didn't mind talking to random strangers about Glen, but talking to her sister was something else entirely. She'd learned long ago that if she told her anything, the whole world would know immediately. Fine. Don't tell me, but don't disillusion yourself. I know you've met someone. Okay, I'm at work. Bye. Kaya stared at the dead phone in her hand for a minute before sighing. Bridget was working 10 at night until 6 in the morning and was always needing to be talked to while she was driving places. Once she arrived, she immediately hung up. It was a very annoying habit. Kaya went to the bathroom before returning to the living room, where the three of them were working, receiving glares from both friends. Oops. I really did go back there to answer the phone, but I was already up, so it seemed logical to potty while I was gone. Kaya sighed heavily. You don't have to tell me. 30 seconds of shunning. She noted the time on her computer and made sure a full minute had passed before speaking again. What's everyone working on tonight? I'm editing the book I finished last night, May responded. I want it published by Monday. That's totally doable, Kaya responded. Your proofreader waiting on it? Yup. I promised to have it to her before I sleep. You've got this, Kaya said encouragingly. Liz? I'm revising. I got edits back, and it looks like someone bled all over my pretty manuscript. I guess it wasn't quite as perfect as I thought it was. Liz shrugged. This will take me 2 or 3 nights to conquer, but I'd like to be finished with at least a third of it before I sleep. Liz rubbed the back of her neck. What about you? I need to write 7,000 words. But I'm meeting Glen at 11, so I really can't stay up past 6 in the morning. I don't need bloodshot eyes when I see him. Kaya was careful to keep her voice calm, so the others wouldn't lecture her again. No one needed to know just how much she cared for him except her. May looked at Kaya, a worried look on her face. How were the writing lessons? Really good. I got to ride this horse named Muffin, and I was even able to get down off her, but I worried for a bit that the horse would become a permanent part of me. May laughed. I can't ever remember not riding. My parents had me on a horse before I started kindergarten. I've been riding forever, Liz told them. Did you enjoy yourself? Absolutely, Kaya responded. It was dicey for a minute there, because I wasn't sure I'd be able to get up enough courage to actually get off the horse, but Glen refused to let me have lunch on it, so I got down. Liz shook her head. Did you have a good time with him? Kaya nodded, her eyes lit up. I did. He said I'm special. May sighed. There was never any doubt of that, Kaya. You're very special. Just be careful. Is that going to be the motif of our entire week together? Being careful? Liz nodded emphatically. That's so much better than heartbreak, don't you think? Kaya shrugged, looking at her laptop. I'm going to be ready to start a sprint at 20 after. You guys? Sure. May didn't need to say anything else. Kaya understood what she was thinking already. I'm in. Liz looked at May for a moment, her gaze full of doubt. Kaya ignored them both. When you were meant to be with someone, you did what you needed to do to make it happen. Even if your friends were doubters. Asterisk. Glen was waiting beside the stable the next morning with 2 four-wheelers. Morning. Kaya wanted to be grumpy, but she couldn't after seeing his huge smile. She covered her yawn. Morning. You know, I'd like mornings better if they started afternoon. Glen laughed, slipping his arm around her shoulders. The fresh morning air will perk you right up. She didn't respond, burying her face against his broad shoulder for a minute. Every minute of her time with him would be catalogued in her mind forever, to be taken out during the long time without him. After a moment, she took the pink helmet that was on the back of one of the four-wheelers. Do we have everything we need? Yup. We're all set to go. All right. I'll follow. You know how to ride a four-wheeler? Kaya nodded. That's one of the few outdoorsy things I do know how to do. I can handle this. She didn't mention to him that he'd been right about not taking horses. Her bum was sore. She moved carefully as she threw one leg over the seat and turned the key, feeling it rumble to life beneath her. You're going to have to lead. I have no idea where we're going. Glen quickly started his vehicle and drove around her toward the path that led into the mountains. It was rare he went there without a horse, but he wanted Kaya to experience all the wonders of River's End Ranch and his beloved state of Idaho. It was so important to him that she loved it all as much as he did. He didn't want to think about why her opinion of his world was so important, but deep down he knew. He'd fallen in love with her the moment she'd told him he belonged on the cover of romance novels. He led her around the cafe to the main road leading into the ranch and took a left toward the mountains. They went over a bridge to the other side of the river, and he stopped on the bank, pointing. When Kaya looked, she saw a large raft with several people on it washing down the river, as well as a canoe with a blond man who looked to be having the time of his life. They stayed close together as they went down the rapids. Want to try that? He called over the sound made by the merry rafters. She shook her head. Too many people. I'd rather spend my time with you. The look he gave her at that made Kaya's heart skip a beat. He shut off his vehicle and grabbed the sack with their lunches in it. Kaya took the quilt that had been tied to the back of her four-wheeler and spread it on the grass overlooking the river. It's so peaceful here. He sank onto his knees on the quilt beside her, quickly divvying up the food. It is. I'd rather be right here, beside this river, than anywhere else in the world. Even more than your own ranch? She asked, surprised. He chuckled. My ranch is just north of River's End, along this same river. The path I'll be taking the children on will follow it. He pulled his sandwich from a plastic baggie and took a big bite, watching her as she spread her meal out in front of her, putting everything in its proper spot. He'd noticed she did that every time they ate. What would happen if I moved your chips to where your water bottle is, and your water bottle where your chips are? No big deal. I'd just move them back. She winked at him as she opened her water bottle and took a big swig of the water. You're not particular about where things go, are you? Nope. Not at all. Unless you move them. He laughed softly. Why couldn't you have come into my life 5 years from now? He asked. I'm not ready for you yet. She shrugged. I wish it was the perfect time for us to meet, but maybe we shouldn't let that matter. He closed his eyes. You realize I can't change my life plans, even for you. As much as he wanted to say that they should just go for it, he'd worked too long and too hard to get his doctorate, and to fix up the ranch, to give up now. Kaya sighed. I know. We have 10 more days until I leave. Let's not worry about the future and just enjoy our time here. Surely he'd realize just how much she mattered to him by then. Either way though, she would give love a chance and savor every moment they had together. Every kiss. Every touch of his hand on hers. She would live the life she wrote about, if only for a short time. Glen took her hand and brought it to his lips. I will savor every minute. I wish things were different, but they're not, so we can't let ourselves feel too much. It was too late for him, of course, but hopefully it wasn't for her. She laughed wryly at that. I'm sorry. The moment I saw you in Kelsey's cave was too late for that. I saw you, and I knew. He blinked slowly. You knew what? I knew I'd lost my heart. Love at first sight. I write about it, but I never believed in it. I believed I'd find love, but not the instant blinding kind. She shrugged, trying to convince him, and herself, that it would all be fine. Don't worry about me. I'm tough. I'll go home and write books, and I'll be just fine. Are you saying you're in love with me, Kaya? She took a deep breath. Never in my life have I met a man I felt like I had to get to know better. I've never pursued a man. I've never really even had a boyfriend. I look at you, and all I can think is that I want to spend forever with you. Yeah, Glen, I'm in love. I'm head over heels, crazy in love with you. But I understand you feel differently, and I'm not going to make things hard for you. I don't, though. The words were soft, and she barely heard them. You don't what? I don't feel differently. I love you. I don't have time to love you, but God help me, I do. He set his sandwich down. I can't ask you to stay though. We only have 2 weeks no matter what we feel. Kaya nodded, biting her bottom lip. She scooted closer to him on the quilt, her hand taking his, and squeezing it. At least I know my feelings aren't one-sided. They're not. We can always keep in touch with emails and through Skype. He slowly shook his head. I can't handle the distraction right now. As much as I know that's what I want, I can't let myself worry about whether you're in Texas sad because you miss me. No, we get 10 more days. That's all. I'll call you when my business is up and running, and you can tell me all about being married with 2.3 kids and a golden retriever. Won't happen. Glen frowned at her, his hand lightly stroking her cheek. Why are you so sure? You talked to me about friends the night we met in the cafe. Well, when I met you, I was reminded of an episode too. You're my lobster, Glen. And lobsters mate for life. He took a deep breath. Are you saying you'd willingly wait 5 years for me? She nodded. I would. I'd prefer to have contact during that time, but I'll just wait if that's what I need to do. He leaned down and brushed his lips across hers. I'm not going to let you wait for me. You need to go on with your life. So we just have 2 weeks together and never think of each other again? I don't have another answer. It's not fair to ask you to wait. Feelings change over time, and I don't want you to feel guilty if they do. Let's not talk of the future again. We have 2 weeks to spend time together and be in love. Kaya forced a smile. Having 2 weeks to spend with someone I love is more than I expected to have this month. Sounds good to me. No talk about the future. We live for today. When she'd told the girl she could do that, she hadn't realized just how hard it would be. No matter though. She was going to be happy with the man she loved. Never would she shed a tear in his presence. Kelsey told me Bigfoot lives here. I want to look for signs after we finish eating. He stared at her for a moment, disbelief etched across his face. Seriously? You believe Bigfoot lives here? I didn't say that. I said that Kelsey believes it, and I promised her I'd look. So, I will. Want to help me? Glen was a bit confused by the abrupt subject change, but he grasped it with both hands, because it kept him from thinking about the day in the very near future when she'd travel back to Texas and resume her life there. I would love to help you find Bigfoot. The look she gave him was filled with pure joy, and his heart caught. How was he going to let her go? He should walk away now and save himself the heartache. As soon as the thought crossed his mind, he knew he couldn't. He had to take advantage of every minute he could with her. He had no choice. The memory of her love would have to keep him going for the rest of his life, because like her, he believed in mating for life. She finished eating and threw all the trash into his sack, before pulling out her phone and looking at the time. I have an hour that I can spend searching for Bigfoot, and then we need to head back. I have to get my nap if I want to write this evening. He nodded solemnly. Sounds good. It didn't though. He wanted to beg her to spend more time with him, but she was there for a reason, and that was to write a book. Not to spend time with a random cowboy she found in the stables. As she searched the grassy area at the base of the mountain for signs of Bigfoot, following along with a list someone, presumably Kelsey, had handwritten for her, he watched Kaya. The expressions that crossed her face in just 1 hour amazed him. She showed him broken leaves and pulled out her phone to take pictures. She carefully studied their surroundings. When it was almost time, she took out her phone again, and he wondered what she'd seen. Instead, she walked to him and put her arm around his waist, holding the phone out for them. You push the button. He nodded, knowing that he'd want a copy of the photo sent to him. If they were only going to have 2 weeks together, there needed to be at least one selfie. He would never forget her. Chapter 5. Kaya remembered to ask Liz that night about the strange cabin she and Glen had passed the day before on their way to the lake. There was this weird cabin that was surrounded by leprechaun, fairy, and gnome lawn ornaments. And I'm sure I saw 6 rabbits on a window seat watching me ride past. Liz chuckled. You probably did. That's Jacqueline Hardy's cabin. She's the person who assigned spots for the RV park. Trust me, you've never met anyone like her. I'm going to have to find a way to work her into a book someday. Well, other than her questionable taste in decorations and owning 6 bunnies, what's weird about her? Kaya asked. She saw May come into the kitchen out of the corner of her eye. The older woman leaned against the island as she and Kaya watched Liz cook. You don't even know the half of it. I love Jacqueline, but she cracks me up sometimes. She says the fairies talk to her, but she won't listen to the gnomes. I think they're mad at her for killing George. Liz shoved a big pot in the oven. Casserole will be done in 30 minutes. Wait, though, who's George? Kaya asked, following Liz into the living room and sitting down. George was one of her lawn gnomes. Liz shook her head. She's a little bit out there, but when I needed someone to talk to about Jack, when I was so confused, she was able to offer me some real insight in a way that no one else was. I mean, I talked to you guys and to Joni, but Jacqueline was amazing. Kaya bit her lip. Maybe I'll stop by and see her. Trouble in paradise? May asked, her voice full of understanding instead of the censure Kaya expected. Kaya shrugged, blinking rapidly to try to keep the tears at bay. She hadn't cried since she and Glen had their talk, but she'd wanted to. Badly. He told me he loves me today. Liz leaned forward, obviously enthralled with the conversation. Really? He said he loves you? Kaya brushed away a tear, hating herself for not being able to stop them. We both said it. But then he said that in 10 days, he's going to say goodbye to me, watch me get on a plane and go back to Texas, but he won't keep in touch. He can't deal with the distraction right now. He said he'll call in 5 years so I can tell him I'm married with 2.3 kids and a golden retriever. May shook her head. So you're not going to see him again, right? Kaya laughed. Are you kidding me? I've got 10 days to spend with the only man I've ever loved, and you want me to forego those days? Not happening. May sighed. I wish you'd count your losses. You really don't understand, do you? If Bob Bodefeld walked in that door right now, and he asked you to spend the next 10 days with him, would you do it? Knowing it would be harder if you couldn't see him again after that? Bob Bodefeld was an actor on the show Lazy Love, and May believed with everything inside her that he was the man for her. Not that she'd ever meet him, but that didn't keep her from believing it. Well, no, but I already know I'm going to die heartbroken and alone. You have the potential to meet someone who you could spend the rest of your life with. So do you. Even Liz met someone. Hey. What do you mean, even Liz? You're making it sound like something's wrong with me, Liz protested. Sorry, Liz. Kaya sighed heavily. I'm going to make the most of the time I have with the man I love. No one is going to be able to convince me to do anything else. Then I'm going to stop trying, May said softly. I hope you'll be happy you made that decision when we leave. I will. Kaya pulled her computer onto her lap. Oh, and tomorrow evening, I'm going to spend time with Glen. I'm not meeting him for lunch. It's my turn to cook, so I'll throw something in the crock pot for you too. Liz nodded. What are you guys doing tomorrow night? Kaya shrugged. He just said he'd be here to pick me up at 6, and I should dress up. Dress up? Liz asked. Where's he taking you? Said something about a place called Post Falls. We're going to eat there, wherever it is. It's a town a short drive from here. Did you bring something dressy? Or just jeans and shorts? I brought a pair of slacks and a skirt just in case. May told me I was overpacking, but now I'm glad I did. Kaya made a face at May. I never said I was perfect, you know. May rolled her eyes at Kaya, but Kaya didn't mind. She knew May loved her as much as she would have loved a little sister if she'd had one. You didn't have to. Everyone else says it for you. Kaya shrugged. Everyone wants to be like you, because you're kind. You find ways to be kind even when other people would be screaming. It's a quality we all admire. May didn't respond. Kaya knew that being complimented made her feel uncomfortable, so she didn't press it, instead looking down at her computer. I have to write 7,000 words before I'm allowed to sleep. The timer on the stove went off then, and Liz got to her feet. We'll feast on casserole, and then we'll work. Kaya nodded, ready for the distraction of her writing. She'd always thought being in love would make it easier for her to work, but instead, it seemed to be harder. She'd push through though. She didn't dare do anything else with May beside her. Asterisk. Kaya woke to her alarm at 3, quite a bit earlier than necessary. After talking to Liz the previous evening, she'd decided to have a talk with Jacqueline, and she wanted to do it before she went out with Glen that evening. The walk to Jacqueline's house was leisurely, and she enjoyed herself. She tucked one of her paperbacks under one arm, thinking she could give the book to the woman in exchange for her help. Of course, it was hard to know if the book was actually a good gift. What if she didn't read romance? When she arrived, she stood outside the gated yard for a moment, looking at the wild hodgepodge of animals there. The fairies told me you'd be coming to visit today. I have fresh snickerdoodles. The fairies said you would prefer milk with your cookies, but I have milk and tea ready, just in case they're lying to me. Sometimes they're devious like that. Kaya couldn't help but smile at the old woman, kneeling in the dirt in front of her home. I'd love some milk if you and the fairies don't mind. I'm Kaya, by the way. The fairies don't help pay for milk, so they don't care a bit. Come into the house while I get the tea, milk, and cookies. You don't mind rabbits, do you? Jacqueline asked from where she stood at the front door, holding it open wide. Not at all, Kaya responded, hurrying into the small house. Once she was inside, she realized that 6 rabbits were nothing on the number that were really there. They seemed to cover every surface. How do you keep the floor from being covered in rabbit? She started to say poop, but thought better of it. Droppings? Oh, they're all litter box trained. Rabbits are smart. You teach one to use the box, and they teach the rest of them. Jacqueline went into the kitchen, waving Kaya away when she made to follow her. Sit down and then we'll talk about you and your man. Did the fairies tell you why I was coming? Kaya asked, understanding now why Liz said she wanted to write about the older woman. She was eccentric, but in a down-to-earth way, and that was something Kaya had never seen before. She came back with tea in a nice china teapot with little pink flowers around the bottom and a fairy emblazoned on the side, a glass of milk, and a plate full of cookies. You've got love troubles, of course. I'm not sure how I'd become the person on this ranch to come to for love troubles, but the fairies sure do give me help when I need it. Perhaps that's why people come to you. You're the only one the fairies talk to. Oh, the fairies will talk to anyone who listens. Other people just refuse to listen. Jacqueline's voice sometimes reminded Kaya of a deep South accent, and sometimes it sounded like it was full of Ireland. So let's talk about Glen. He's a good man. Kaya sighed. The fairies even told you who I came to talk about? They didn't have to. I have eyes, don't I? The 2 of you rode past here together a couple of days ago. I can put 1 and 1 together and come up with the right answer, you know. Oh, of course. I forgot we'd come by here, Kaya fibbed. No, you didn't. You knew as well as I did. Anyway, you're in love with Glen Johnson, are you? Kaya nodded slowly. She'd had no idea his last name was Johnson, but she refused to let on. How had she fallen in love with a man whose last name she didn't even know? Yes, I am. I knew from the moment I saw him we were meant to be together. Jacqueline's lips turned up at the corners. You're a romance writer with lots of illusions. The fairies told you I'm a romance writer? Jacqueline laughed. How many Kayas do you think are running around? You brought me a book with your name on it, and that book is obviously a romance. I'm doing that simple math we mentioned earlier. You know, adding 1 and 1? Oh, yes. Do you want it? Kaya asked, suddenly feeling foolish. Do I want to read a book by the young woman sitting in my house right now? You can bet your sweet little Texas bottom I want to read it. And yes, the fairies told me you were from Texas. Now, let's get to the trouble you're having, dearie. Kaya leaned forward, ready to listen in rapt silence. Oh, yes please. You have to tell me what the trouble is, Kaya. The fairies were in a bad mood this morning when they told me you were coming. They think it's a bit too dry this time of year. But it's rained every morning I've been here. The fairies are never satisfied. Jacqueline studied Kaya for a moment. Well? Why can't you and Glen seem to make things work? Kaya sighed. Well, I told him I love him, and he says he feels the same. Our problem is simple. He has plans for the next few years of his life that don't include having a wife or a girlfriend around, so he's going to send me back to Texas with a pat on my head and an intense ache in my heart. Jacqueline frowned. So what does he propose you do? He said we'll spend the time I'm here being in love, and then I'll go home and we'll forget each other. How do you feel about that? I'm going to spend every minute I can with him. I'm not going to hide under a rock, because I'm afraid of heartbreak. So exactly what do you need from me, if you already know what your plan is? Kaya made a face. I don't know. I was hoping you'd have some great wisdom from the fairies that would make it all work. Only you know what your heart wants. If you want to spend more time with him, then that's exactly what you should do. If you want to hide from the love of your life, then you should do that. Jacqueline sighed loudly. My heart was broken many years ago. A young man kept approaching me and asking for my love. When I finally decided to give it to him, he was shot and killed before I had a chance to tell him he had it. Don't be afraid to give him your heart. A broken heart is so much stronger than one that has never learned to love. I'm sure you're right. I'll keep doing what I think is right. Kaya reached out and squeezed the older woman's hand. Thank you for inviting me into your home and feeding me cookies today. Your kindness means a lot to a girl very far from home. She laid the book that she'd autographed earlier on Jacqueline's coffee table, thankful she'd thought to throw a few in her suitcase before leaving Texas. If not for kindness, I can't think of a single reason people should interact with one another. It's important to all of us. Kaya got to her feet. And now I need to go get all dolled up for a date. Jacqueline smiled. Wear the pink lipstick. It won't show as much when he smudges it. Oh, he's going to smudge my lipstick tonight? I think I like having a friend who knows the fairies. You are a wise child. Jacqueline got to her feet and opened the door. I'll see you again before you leave. You will? According to the fairies. Kaya smiled, raising her hand in a wave as she hurried out of the house and back toward the barefoot bungalow. As she rushed along, she waved at the few people she knew. There were some familiar faces, but she hadn't met everyone yet. Sometimes it was hard to tell the employees of the ranch from the guests. Kaya's mind whirred as she thought about everything Jacqueline had said, knowing one of her sentences would stick with her forever. A broken heart is so much stronger than one that has never learned to love. My heart is going to be very strong then. Kaya dressed in a short skirt that stopped just above her knees. It was meant to be just past the knees, but Kaya's long legs changed the way a lot of clothes were meant to look. When a knock came just before 6, May hurried to the door and opened it right before Kaya could get there. Come in, May told Glen. Glen stepped in, his glance darting nervously about the cabin. He was wearing a pair of slacks and a green dress shirt, which brought out the brown in his eyes. Kaya walked to him and kissed his cheek, resting one hand on his shoulder. What time will you have her back? May asked. Glen blinked a couple of times, surprised at the question. I'll do my best to have her here before midnight. He knew this wasn't her sister, so why did she think she had the right to ask him when he'd have her home? Good. She needs to work tonight. Kaya rolled her eyes. She'd hit her word goals every single day that they'd been in Idaho, and May knew it. She had no need for her friend to play the part of her mother. I'll see you later. May stood watching them leave, her eyes filled with worry. After Kaya closed the door, she shook her head. I don't know what came over her. She's worried I'm going to break your heart. Correction. She knows you're going to break my heart. She's just hoping it won't be so bad she can't put me back together again. She tried to sound blasé about the whole thing, as if it didn't matter her heart would be broken, but she didn't come across quite as unconcerned as she would have liked. He sighed. I don't want to hurt you, Kaya. He opened the passenger door of his older model Ford truck for her, admiring her legs as she drew them inside. You look beautiful tonight. Kaya smiled. I know you don't want to hurt me, just like I don't want to hurt you. I think we both know a mutual heartbreak is inevitable, so we should move on with our lives. She paused as he closed her door and hurried around the truck. And you look pretty handsome yourself tonight. Glen slid in beside her, starting the truck automatically. There's a little steak place in Post Falls. They have a small dance floor. We could go to the restaurant here, but Thursday night is trivia night, and I want you all to myself. You do you? I do. How's your book coming along? Kaya smiled. It's good. I'll have it done before we head home. Well, before I head home. May's flying straight to New York to spend a week with her assistant, Sarah. So you're flying home alone? Yeah, but it's okay. May talked me into springing for first class this trip. My legs actually fit. He laughed. I've never been on a flight where my legs fit. They're a little longer than most, though. She frowned. I love that you're as much taller than me as you are, but I can see there'd be some difficulties too. Did you play basketball? He sighed. Why does everyone ask me that? Yes, I played. I did my undergrad on a basketball scholarship. Do you like basketball? I do. I mean, I never wanted to spend the rest of my life playing basketball, but I enjoyed it. What about you? Did you play basketball? Nope. I did play a little volleyball, but I was never coordinated enough to dribble a ball. What I can do is spike a ball like nobody's business. He laughed. We have a volleyball pit on ranch property. We'll have to get a couple of teams together and play while you're here. I'm rusty, but I'd play. She hadn't played volleyball since she graduated from college more than a year before. I had a feeling you would. What do you think of Idaho so far? I've fallen in love with it. Texas with its dried grass and flat land will never be the same for me again. I guess I don't think of Texas as flat. Dry, yes, but flat, no. He pulled into a parking lot. We have about 20 minutes before our reservation. Should we go in? Nah. Let's sit and talk a little more. What part of Texas do you live in? I'm in the DFW area. I grew up in a small town just outside Fort Worth, but I went to the University of Texas at Arlington. Once I graduated, I just stayed. I have a little apartment there that works perfectly for one person. It's a college town, so chock full of apartments. So you live in Arlington, Texas? Why have I heard of that? Kaya shrugged. We're the entertainment capital of North Texas. The Rangers and Cowboys both play there. We have Six Flags Over Texas and Hurricane Harbor. And the city is part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, but it's also 350,000 people, so it's a big city in its own right. Sounds too big for me. I don't even like going into Lewiston, and that's a tenth of the size of Arlington. He shook his head. No, I'm a small-town boy, and I like it that way. She smiled. Well, remember I was raised in a small town. I'd still prefer to live in one, but that would require moving back out to the country. May keeps telling me I should move to Wiggyville, which is close to her, but I just don't want to move. Where I am, I can walk to most things I need. I have a car, but I hate to drive, so it works better for me to stay where I am. So you're still a small-town girl at heart? Of course, I am. You can take the girl out of the country, but you can never take the country out of the girl. And I'm country through and through. He leaned down and touched his lips gently to hers. We should go in and be around people. Tomorrow night, I'll fix you dinner. You can cook? He shrugged. I've been known to rumble around in the kitchen. I'll take you up on that then. I love the idea of you cooking for me. And I'd love to see your place. He smiled, wishing he could show her knowing she'd be staying. He couldn't let himself think of that though. He had to keep her in the compartment he'd put her in. A summer love that wouldn't last. She could be nothing else to him.